the Trojan horse of humor in narcissistic abuse. In Greek mythology, the Greeks were fighting the Trojans who were behind their fortress walls. And after some time, the Greeks seemingly retreated and then left a large wooden horse that the Trojans took for a gift to signify their victory. So the Trojans opened their gates and wheeled the wooden horse in, only to find that the horse held Greek soldiers inside of it. Once inside the fortress, the Greeks emerged from the horse and captured the fortress. In some narcissistic parent-scapegoat-child relationships, humor can function in a similar way. When a parent who routinely devalues, deprives, or domineers their child also knows how to be funny, that humor can create a confusing mix of reactions in the child. On one hand, the child feels wounded by the parent's hostility and self-absorption, and on the other, the parent's ability to make the child laugh feels pleasurable. To resolve the confusion, the child will often forget how they are being mistreated. And by forget, I mean that in sort of a dissociative sense. Today's video explores how a narcissistic parent's use of humor can create a bond with their scapegoat child against a backdrop of continual devaluation, deprivation, and domineering. I'll explain the brain chemistry involved in laughter, why the parent's humor overrides the child's awareness that they're being mistreated, and how scapegoat survivors may carry this template into adult relationships. And I encourage you to watch until the end to learn how you can evaluate the role of humor in your relationships more critically in order to reclaim humor as part of a safe connection instead of a distraction from ongoing harm. Well, my name is Reid, and I'm a practicing licensed psychotherapist in California and a scapegoat survivor myself. I've worked to understand what helps scapegoat survivors best recover the quality of life that they deserve. And this has led me to what I call the 3 pillars of recovery. Pillar number 1 is making sense of what happened so that you know it was not your fault. Pillar number 2 is gaining distance from narcissistic abusers today and closeness to safer people. And pillar number 3 is living in defiance of the narcissistic abuser's rules. And before we dive in, I want to let you know about a free ebook I've created called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as the Scapegoat. If you grew up feeling unfairly blamed, criticized, or made to feel like the problem in your family, then this ebook can help you understand why that happened and how you can begin recovering. It explains why certain children get scapegoated, how that can affect your self-worth, and what healing may look like. If you've ever wondered, was it really me or was there something deeply wrong in my family? I think this ebook can offer you the clarity and compassion needed to answer that question. You can download it for free using the link in the description box below or by clicking here. It's a great way to make sense of what happened so that you can begin incorporating that first pillar of recovery into your life. The effects of a narcissistic parent's humor on the scapegoat child. For a scapegoat child, the same parent elevates and reduces their stress. On the one hand, the parent's use of devaluation, deprivation, and domineering stresses the scapegoat child's nervous system. This drives the release of what's called cortisol, which is the body's main stress hormone. A high cortisol state feels unpleasant because the body is tense, restless, hyper alert, and unable to fully relax. Most people in this state just want it to stop because prolonged cortisol activation feels like being stuck on high alert. It can lead to anxiety, irritability, or difficulty concentrating. Laughter can create a sudden drop in cortisol, leading to relief from this unpleasant state. So the scapegoat child who's made to laugh by their narcissistic parent finds that the same person who's putting them in a state of high stress is also who relieves it. Now the child's body has proof that things aren't so bad with this parent. No matter how bad the child feels from being devalued, deprived, and domineered by their parent, that kid can also count on the opiate of laughter being delivered to them too. The dilemma of hope in a narcissistic parent. So this dynamic reinforces something that is necessary yet debilitating for the scapegoat child: an unyielding hope in an idealized parent. So children are born with a need to see their parent as a kind, protective, and wise overseer, someone that they can look up to and admire. No parent can perfectly live up to these expectations, But with good enough parents, the letdowns are not so severe that the child's faith in the parent gets truly shaken. But a scapegoat child can't get their need to admire a parent genuinely met. That parent's mistreatment of the scapegoat child makes it impossible for the child to sincerely look up to the parent. So the child has to resort to other psychological workarounds to find a way to get this need met. And one of the ways they do this is by cherry picking moments of relief from threat that their parent offers them and exaggerating these into proof of their narcissistic parent's goodness. So the narcissistic parent who can make their scapegoat child laugh offers just these morsels of faux goodness in a sea of otherwise cruel treatment. Of course, in reality, the child's body is just responding to normal neurophysiology. Cortical goes up with stress that the parent is visiting upon them, and laughter brings it down. But the child interprets this as meaning that now the parent is capable of goodness in the form of humor. It's just that the child behaves too badly to deserve this good treatment from the parent. This sets the child up to conclude and believe that they are defective and or undeserving. Now the parent's status in the child's mind stays protected, and it's the child who is supposedly lowly. Loss of autonomy. Because the narcissistic parent controls when the humor happens and when it gets withheld, the child learns that any emotional relief they experience depends on the parent's whims. The child isn't in control of when they get to feel good with the parent. They're always waiting for the parent to crack a joke or a quip, lift the tension, and let the child back in. This can teach the child that closeness has to be earned and that the criteria for earning it are always changing. One day the parent may find the child funny or clever, and the next the same behavior by the child might be met with contempt. The parent determines when laughter is allowed, and this creates a pattern where the child stays emotionally available to the parent at all times, hoping to receive the next sign of approval. Well, let's illustrate this with another anonymized case example. Jackie's mother could light up a room when she was in a good mood. She had a natural charm and charisma that drew people to her, and her wit was unmatched. She could size up a person instantaneously and deliver a one-liner that both cut the person down and invited them to laugh along. Jackie's mother was also exceedingly self-absorbed. She expected Jackie to be devoid of problems and would react with disgust if Jackie ever asked her for help. These moments sufficiently and traumatizingly humiliated Jackie such that she learned early on not to ask her mother for anything. Her mother's priorities lay in making people outside the house like her, not in caring about her daughter's feelings towards her. Jackie, though, was different. She was earnest and well-meaning, yet she'd been deprived of the attention and emotional availability that all kids need from their parents. So as a result, Jackie carried a sense of emptiness within that she didn't have anyone to talk about with. So it just became part of her reality that she learned to cope with. She did so by seeking experiences that let her forget the emptiness for the moment. It seemed like there was no solving this problem for real, so she might as well get whatever relief from it that she could. Her mother's humor offered Jackie this. When her mother was in the kitchen having a drink with her father after he got home from work, her mother could really hold court. She would make quips about Jackie and the rest of the family would laugh along. Jackie would too. She knew it was pointless to take offense at her mother's derision. It would only alienate her from the rest of the family. So Jackie found herself laughing along in a way that didn't seem insincere to her. Jackie felt a lightness and a break from the interminable tension that she otherwise always had to carry around. She would run to the kitchen when her father got home from work in hopes that her mother would make her the butt of some of the jokes. She actually craved the attention that she didn't otherwise get, and due to her mother's ability to be funny, Jackie got to laugh. Jackie's existence didn't offer her many moments of laughter or relief otherwise. How this pattern shows up in adult relationships. So scapegoat survivors who've learned to associate humor with closeness may feel a strong pull towards people who are funny, charming, or entertaining, even if those same people also devalue, deprive, and domineer the survivor. The laughter can become a familiar justification for staying close. It can also become the measure by which the relationship is evaluated. Something like, if we're laughing, then things must be good. This creates a blind spot. Scapegoat survivors may downplay the emotional harm they're experiencing in friendships or relationships because the humor feels so familiarly relieving. But the larger pattern of emotional harm remains. It's the same logic that had to be applied to their funny yet emotionally abusive narcissistic parent. Well, let's go back to Jackie. When she was in high school, she was drawn towards a very popular girl in her class named Mallory. This girl's popularity was based on her biting wit and ability to make people laugh with her at themselves. So Mallory would routinely mock Jackie's voice when she'd speak to her other friends. Jackie might ask her other friend, let's say Amy, how Amy did in her lacrosse game. And Mallory would interrupt with, "What, do you want to carry Amy's equipment for her too?" The group of friends found themselves laughing even though something felt off about it. But Mallory was quick to turn on anyone who didn't laugh with her at whomever she was targeting. So the rest of the group fell in line. Even Jackie found herself smiling at Mallory's quip. Jackie knew something felt wrong, but that was buried too far down to do anything with in that moment. Disentangling humor from harm. Well, to recover, scapegoat survivors need to recognize that it's possible for someone to be funny and unsafe. That in essence, laughter can feel good and obscure how you're being affected in the relationship. This means learning to evaluate relationships by more than how they feel in isolated moments. For example, do you feel drained after spending time with someone who jokes around a lot but never asks you how you're doing? Or do you feel tight in the chest after a conversation filled with supposed teasing that always seemed to come at your expense? In the past, these kinds of experiences have had to be ignored in favor of the laughter. But in adulthood, it's more possible to reconsider sort of the dark side of such relationships. There's a promise and a challenge in doing so. First, scapegoat children and survivors who've gotten hooked on their parents' humor often feel enslaved to it, as though they have to laugh at things that at some level they know they don't find funny. Such experiences can rob the child of the sense that they're in full possession of themselves. They may feel played with, yet unable to prevent it. Reconsidering the cost of being close to such people offers the promise of inner liberation from the anesthesia of the other person's humor, which can mask the emotional harm that's being done. But the challenge in doing this is that you may have to do without that laughter drug, at least from these types of people. Often scapegoat survivors report that when they begin pulling away from harmful yet entertaining relationships, they feel emotionally flat. Interactions with healthier people may seem boring by comparison. It's not that those relationships are actually lacking, but that their internal reward system has been shaped by extremes, sharp contrast between cruelty and relief. In relationships where laughter was tied to psychological harm, there's always a kind of a high. The relief felt bigger because of the intensity of the pain that preceded it. When that cycle is interrupted, there's no longer a sharp drop in pain that would make the relief feel so intense. Instead, there's more something like calm. At first, calm can feel like nothing. And if this disorienting nothingness can be endured, you may find that your internal reference points begin to shift. Moments of warmth or quiet connection may begin to carry more weight. You may even start to notice that you're laughing more in relationships where you feel safe, and maybe a lot less so, or even not at all, in ones where you feel like you're being subtly dismissed or ignored. Questions that support re-evaluation. Well, once scapegoat survivors are able to step back from that automatic pull of humor in friendships and relationships, it can become possible to ask different questions. Questions like, how interested is this person in what I have to say? Or do they respond when I share something vulnerable, or do they deflect? And are they consistent in how they show up, or does their warmth fluctuate? Do they share their own challenges, or do they mostly stay in the role of entertainer? And last, when I'm around them, do I feel more or less like myself? These are the kinds of questions that laughter alone can't answer. They require reflection and honesty. but they also create room for relationships that are both emotionally safe and enjoyable instead of just one or the other. Getting used to harmless humor. For scapegoat survivors whose formative relationships paired emotional pain with momentary bouts of laughter, it's essential to build new connections that don't rely on this structure. This is what makes the withdrawal from the drug of laughter possible. There is now a substitute form of connection that's not as intense, but far more steady. And I think that this is where group work with other scapegoat survivors can be particularly useful. In these groups, you get to look at and express the entirety of your experience without being mocked or derided. Instead, you get to find acceptance and validation. And over time, this form of connection that exists alongside your self-possession instead of compromising it begins to feel more and more valuable and attainable. And one such group option is the Breaking the Scapegoat Spell group class. This is an 8-week long live online group that I facilitate to help scapegoat survivors of narcissistic abuse reconnect with who they really are, examine the relational patterns that developed in childhood, and build new ways of being in the world. In the group, we explore themes like how to spot and challenge the internalized rules that you had to follow to stay connected to your parent, how you can identify and start the process of living from your strengths, and tools to help your mind and body reclaim the attention and energy that you've had to devote to the scapegoat role. And best of all, you'll get to practice safe connection through structured partner exercises that ask you to apply the concepts that I talk about. The class is limited to 10 participants to ensure that a strong community develops where everyone's contribution is noticed and appreciated. If you'd like to learn more, you can find a link to the group in the description box below or by clicking here. Well, let's go back to Jackie and see how she weaned herself off of harmful humor and found relationships that were built on much more than laughter. She moved to a different state than her family when she was 25 years old because she found a clerical job there. For the first time in her life, she wasn't following her feelings of guilt that told her to spend every weekend with her parents. Despite how little her mother seemed to think of her, she always seemed to want Jackie around. And her mother would make quips that Jackie thought she was better than her family if circumstances ever prevented Jackie from making it to them on the weekends. Jackie had had to train herself to keep her mother's spirits up or else. The threat of making her mother feel bad for having other sources of happiness scared Jackie. But now that she lived far away, she felt so much more free. Jackie had her weekends to herself. At work, she met two friends, Cheryl and Sarah. Cheryl initially really drew Jackie to her. She was charming and charismatic. She said that she abhorred small talk and only wanted to talk about real things. This meant asking Jackie personal questions and then responding in charming and funny ways. It also meant gossiping a lot about their coworkers. She would tell Jackie a lot about others in a way that put them down, but did so with a flourish of humor. Jackie found herself laughing a lot when Cheryl was around, and this time it was at others' expense instead of her own. After about a month on the job, Cheryl's availability for Jackie seemed less consistent. A new woman had arrived at the job, and Cheryl set her sights on her. She seemed to have a lot less time for Jackie. Now Jackie would see Cheryl laughing with the new employee and worry that Jackie, was the new target. Sarah, the other coworker, was different. She quietly went about her business. She didn't often make Jackie laugh, but she did show what seemed like genuine interest in Jackie. Sarah would ask her where she grew up, what she liked to do in her free time, and so on. Initially, Jackie felt trapped in their conversations. She didn't get the charge that she usually got with Cheryl. There wasn't any excitement or laughter in their interactions, but there was also no danger. Jackie didn't feel the edginess that she was so familiar with, not just with Cheryl, but also with her mother. Well, over the next 5 years, Jackie gradually gravitated away from Cheryl and towards Sarah. She initially felt some despair at the lack of excitement, but in the sort of psychological room that resulted, she could look at and begin to question Cheryl and her mother's use of humor in their mistreatment of her. Jackie grew to see that the laughter she enjoyed with her mother and Cheryl covered up the dark side of their relationship. This laughter was a drug that Jackie worked hard to get off of, but this time not alone. Sarah had become her best friend and was by her side as Jackie sort of detoxed from that drug of laughter. Well, I hope you found today's video helpful, especially if you grew up as a scapegoat in a narcissistic family, but always felt sort of hooked by the family or maybe narcissistic parents' sense of humor. Recognizing how humor can function in this sort of narcissistically abusive way can help you gain clarity on how humor can function in safer relationships. And with that, I want to thank everyone for your continued support of this channel and the resources that surround it. And it's, I guess, just very, very meaningful to me each week to see, sort of how many people have had to go through this scapegoat experience. But I think in a lot of ways, even though it may not feel this way all the time, have emerged on the other side to be able to know what it was and talk about it in the comments section, about your own experience or responding to what others have posted. One of the most painful and I think harshest aspects of being the scapegoat is the isolation. And every time I read the comments in these videos, it's clear that that's not what's happening here and in so many other places. I want to mark that and recognize what everyone's contributing in that way. And with that, I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.